morning, everyone.
Morning, Bolu.
Welcome back to the State of Africa podcast. I have here with me Koketso Mazimba. Is it Mazimba? Is it correct?
Yes, it's Mzimba,
Okay,
but yeah,
okay. So Koketso is a builder and entrepreneur from South Africa, working at the intersection of business and innovation. He is a fellow of the Jasserie for Africa Pan-African Apprenticeship, right? It's a program focused on developing principled leaders who are building real solutions across the continent. So I guess he's really fit for this podcast. He's also the founder of Complier. Is it Complier? Yeah,
yes,
Complier.
comply.
A compliance as a service platform designed to make regulatory compliance simpler and more accessible for small and medium-sized businesses. Alongside this, he is the founder and CEO of Kina Sportswear, a South African sportswear brand. He has led from the ground up, combining business, identity, and local production. So, welcome with me, Koketso Mazimba. Thank you so much for doing this, bro. I really appreciate
No, thank you
it.
so much, Bolu.
So,
Thank you for inviting me.
um, like I already said, so the purpose of this podcast really is to help Africans and Africa in general, to bring us from where we are right now to a better future we all desire. So we're really talking about Africa. That's the essence of it. So I'm just going to dive right in and say, what is your favorite thing? What's your favorite thing about being, first of all, South African and then being African?
Okay, I would say first of all, being a South African, I love the country, like the land, the resources, the weather, the people. I love everything about it. Yeah, um, I had an ex-girlfriend, right? And we were just thinking about like we were just like that whole thing of like when you were just like dreaming with your ex-girlfriend, you like, do you want to travel the world? Do you want to stay somewhere else? And I was like, no. Yeah, like, no, I don't want to go anywhere else. We have a beautiful country. And I would say, as Africa, the same. It's a very rich continent. It's just a shame that we are not the ones who are like the benefactors of our own continent. But our continent is very rich. Like, I wouldn't leave Africa. I always see pictures of Kenya, Rwanda, like Ghana, Nigeria, and I always think, wow, it's a very beautiful place. But of course, you know, I don't know. It's like a blessing and a curse, beautiful place, beautiful infrastructure, beautiful weather, rich continent, but the social side of it is very dark. So it's always like two sides of a coin. But I
Yeah.
love Africa.
Talking about Africa, like you said, is a gift and a curse, really, because the continent is very rich, the continent is diverse, but for some reason we've not been able to make it work. Well, let's say for some reason, because I mean the reasons are quite obvious, but we're still struggling to make it work. So that being said, do you think it's really possible for Africans to move from, or don't let me say Africans, Africa as a continent, to move from being underdeveloped to being developed?
Yeah, it's just another two or like a coin with two sides again. Very possible. But I think the problem with Africans, it's not the problem, like really, it's not that because God made us less or anything. I just think that the problem is we have a wrong mindset, and we focus on the wrong things. We are not well rounded as other cultures. I'm not talking about Caucasians necessarily, or Europeans. I'm just talking about Asians. If you look at Asians, they value knowledge, right? They value knowledge. I mean, they have culture, but they also value knowledge. They understand that these two things are not mutually exclusive, culture and knowledge. And I feel like with us right now, we despise knowledge. You know, our mindset is
Mm.
that most of us like despise knowledge. We idolize culture more than a good balance between culture and knowledge. Hence, when people see adverts or advertising, when it's African advertising, or when people usually advertise to Africans, they usually like this dancing stuff, like all of this dancing stuff. Like we are seen as just culture people. We're always seen as like the culture center of the world. But we are capable, we are more than capable of producing what China has, what the United States has. It's just that we need to have balanced, we need to balance our values to say, because like, if you look at ancient Africa, if you look at Timbuktu, if you look at Egypt, if you look at Sudan, if you look at ancient Africa had that, right? They had culture, but they also had knowledge.
Yeah.
They understood
Yep.
that these two things need to work together. So I think that's how you build a good civilization. So I just think right now we are just too one-sided. We are capable, but we are also one-sided. And also another thing is that we are not united. I think that's a big thing.
Yeah.
We are just not united. I mean, this is my observation. Of course, it's not a statistics, but I just believe that I wasn't raised in apartheid or the era in South Africa, of course, when there was apartheid and all of that. But I see the post effects of that. I see the effects in real life, like black, sort of like Africans don't have confidence in their own ability. They see themselves less, and they only see Europeans or other people better than them. It's really fascinating when you look at it. So I think there's like when like after someone like came out of an abusive relationship, yes, there might not
Yeah.
be, but they have trauma, right? They have trauma they carry through. So yeah, we have that trauma. So and also that produced a thing of every man for himself.
Yep. Yep.
We have
Yep.
this every man for himself because we have this like poverty mindset, this like less of ourselves. So obviously when we get into money, when we get into wealth, everybody's looking out for themselves now. It's like, what was the point of us uniting and everything? I've never had anything in my life, so I'd just rather have everything. So you have greed at the top, corruption at the top, and it also reflects at the bottom as well because it's like crabs in a bucket. Everybody's fighting. So yeah. So I just think there's just a lot of things we just need to heal from.
I mean, so many things we need to heal from.
Mm.
So how would you then propose we get rid of that mindset? How do you think that is? How can that be done? Do you think it's possible? And do you think it can be done? Then how would you propose we go about it? Because many people have tried and they failed. Because if they had succeeded, Africa would not be what it is today. So how do you think that can be done? What do you think?
So, Boli, I don't want to lie to you. It's very complicated because remember, like we live in a globalized context now. I think
Hmm.
this is kind of like apartheid part two. It's like not apartheid part two, but colonization part two. We see it with Venezuela and all these things where if countries act independently, if we um, take our sovereignty, right, we are seen as a threat, and there's going to be wars and everything. But if it were up to me, I would obviously number one start with our civilization, start with our culture. Start with our culture. There's so many things plaguing us from a cultural level because if you look at, well, I'm talking about South Africa, right?
Yeah,
South
yeah.
Africa has a lot of cultural problems. You have crime, you have teenage pregnancy, you have all these other things, right? And it's all because spiritually we idolize the wrong things. There's nothing
Mm,
wrong with culture, but there's nothing wrong with music, there's nothing wrong with art, but it should be for the betterment of our society. You understand?
mm,
Right now, we have a culture that promotes the degeneration of our society. We have a culture that promotes, I would say, us not being at our best. Us not being at our best. So it all starts at the cultural level. All starts with family. So even that concept
mm,
has been broken, right? Very African
mm.
concept: family, tribes,
Yeah.
community, village. Those things, those things is what helped Africans initially to evolve
Yes.
as a people initially. So we kind of have lost that. So it's very possible, but I think the change needs to be deep. It's not just it won't take one person to do it. It will take everybody, individuals. It's also up to individuals, I just believe, because you know another complex of the post-apartheid or post-colonial era is that we look to government as our messiah, right? Government has become a messiah, sort of. And I always say, the government is not a messiah. It's not your messiah. The government won't save you. What we need is individuals. What it starts with you. So people, we are not taking responsibility of our continent. We are not taking responsibility. What I'm talking from South African, what I see every day is that people always look for handouts,
Mm.
you know. And I just believe that, it's also that thing psychologically to also just believe that we are capable. I think we should start looking at ourselves as like we are capable. We should know who we are as Africans because a lot of things in the world are just lies, Bolu, they are lies, the history we're taught in school is lies because
Yeah,
you come out of the schooling system believing that white people have always been supreme. Europeans are the supreme race who just control everything. And, everybody else in the lens of history is just less. We have a great history. We have a capable history. We are mathematicians. We build technologies. We had that, I mean, we built pyramids and people are still confused about how they are actually built today.
right.
So I just believe that also, so that's what I'm just saying. I just believe that everything begins with understanding self, like who we are as Africans, and looking at ourselves as not um, based on our recent history or anything, but looking at ourselves as like we are made in the image of God and we are capable of anything. There's nothing we are not capable of. We are just capable of everything. So, I mean, I want to be that change, of course. The change begins, they say, be the change you want to see in the world. That's how I want to see my world. I know that my circumstances,
Preach.
my skin color will never stop me from attaining what I want to attain. And that's what I want other people to do as well. Whether you're Indian or whatever, I just think you should just transcend. There's a point where we need to transcend because, I mean, we look at ourselves. I mean, the people who look at themselves like that, this is my last point. But the people who think about the people who look at themselves in the lens of
Better
in the lens
days.
of I cannot do it,
Mm.
in the
Okay.
lens of like I cannot do it because look at the history of my people. Look, you've been
Yeah,
colonized. Think about the people who adopt that pessimistic mindset. Think about where they are. They cannot transcend that. They
yeah,
cannot transcend.
yeah,
They cannot go above that. So there's no limits, Bolu. I just think everything begins with education. I'm not
yeah,
against culture, but I would wish black people to read about their history, to actually know who they are, because, fine, you come out because the history that they tell you in school is a lie. It's all a lie.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
all a lie.
yeah.
It's a lie.
Absolutely, absolutely,
So
absolutely.
it's up to you to educate yourself to really know, okay, I'm an African and this is what this is who I am. This is what people have built. So we are capable of doing this. So what's stopping us now to actually critically evaluate that? So education, I would say, the right education, not just education, the right education. Yeah,
So,
the
so
right
to move,
education.
to shift the mindset is really about education. And because a lot of what we are being told, a lot of what we are ingesting is the wrong kind of education. So if we get the right kind of education, I guess it's going to help. It's going to go a long way, which is what I'm trying to do with this whole podcast, with this platform. And the reaction of a lot of people has been, oh, we're not taught this in school. This was ignored, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of people don't know about these things. I mean, someone reached out to me. I was like, some of these names, I've never heard them before because a lot of the education we got started from colonization, right? So you were taught that
Mm,
you've always been under. But what existed before colonization? A lot of people do not know that. A lot of people do not know these things. I mean, like you mentioned, Africans built pyramids and they are still trying to figure out how that is possible. So the people who did that, where are they today? They've been told to believe that they are less, which is really, really sad. So let's look on the bright side now. Let's look on the positive side. What what like I mean in interacting with other African nationalities, what has been some culture shocks you've heard or experienced just by interacting? Like, really, that's interesting. Are there some things that you've encountered that you're like, oh, that is really, really nice?
Yeah, okay, I'm a Christian, by the way. So
Yeah.
I'm part of the church. So the people that I congregate with are from Malawi. And
Ooh, okay.
it was, yeah, like it was, yeah. So it was such a culture shock. It was such a culture shock, the humility, their downtonedness, everything about them was such a shock. I mean, I think also just I just think another thing that shocks me about cultures, especially African cultures, especially from a South African context, we have a lot of values that I think we have lost
Mm,
from because of westernization, right?
mm,
For example, I think there's a lot to learn about masculinity from our
mm,
African cultures.
mm.
There's a lot to learn about femininity from our African cultures. Um, you know, People are going to universities today, and they're learning about westernization and Aristotle and all these other, Eurocentric ideas and concepts. But there's so much to learn, Bolu, from our own cultures. There's
Yeah,
so much to learn
yeah.
from our own cultures. And I think that's the nicest thing I've discovered about African cultures. Um, to a point where I'm just thinking, man, I'm just too westernized at this point. Like to question my own identity. Like,
Yeah.
no, Bolu, because like, I just believe that part of westernization, I'm not gonna say everything about it is bad. There's we can learn from Europeans, you can learn from Asians. But I just think that they have actually kind of brainwashed us in their with their agenda. Their agenda has
Mm,
brainwashed us. I know I'm looking at the bright side, but the bright side is basically there is so much to learn from our cultures. So yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily I don't have any culture shock experiences. But I want to be rural now. For some reason, I want to be rural. I feel like I'm not, because I'm born in Gauteng and I've always lived my life in Gauteng. And Gauteng is like a westernized
mm,
province. It's not where, you go to the villages or anything. It has no village. Everything is semi-urban or urban. So I've grown up my whole life there. And I just believe that when I saw things outside of the countryside, where like there's homesteads and all of that, like it's so humble, so peaceful. It's so bigger than money, the flash, the lights, the glitter. And you're just much more connected spiritually to what actually matters in life, to
mm.
focus on what actually matters. And there's so much to learn from our cultures.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So in all of this now, in all of this, from what you've seen, from what you've experienced, what do you think is then stopping? So let's move outside of South Africa for a bit now. Like you said in your interactions, what you if you say that our cultures are very very good, are very we've neglected our culture for a long time now. Now, if you are interacting with other Africans and realize how similar you are, right? What then is stopping African countries from coming together to break out of this bubble, to break out of this disadvantage that we are in? So what if we because if we come together, in my own opinion, if we come together, I think we have enough power to then break out of this. But then it seems there's something stopping African
Yeah.
countries from uniting.
Okay.
What do you think that is?
At the end of the day, Bolu, I just think what you said, you know, unity, right? Unity. As I said, I'm the man of the book, right? So you are familiar with the Tower of Babel. Are you
Yeah.
familiar with the Tower of Babel, right? The Tower of Babel, the story says like, those people came together and they spoke one language, and God even said nothing was impossible for them.
Mm-hmm.
Unity, speaking the same language, that's how actually Europeans actually got to this point, because they understood that okay, we cannot speak different languages. Let's speak one language. Let's speak the same thing. Let's be united, you know. So that's what I
I mean,
believe.
when you think
That's
about it, right?
that's what
Because like you mentioned, that's what got Europeans to this point. And when you think about it, it was so the First World War happened, and then the Second World War. At that point, America was already like making headway, But then you realize that after the First and the Second World War, they just overtook everyone because there was division amongst the Europeans, right? Because the World War was like you're fighting with, you're doing, I mean, Japan, France, Germany, Britain, and all these people, right? The moment that discord came in, USA took over, Silicon Valley took over, their developments took over, and then they started buying weapons from the USA, and then USA became what it is today. I mean, I'm not saying as at 1776 they were not already as good as they were supposed to be, but at that point there was a
Mm.
drastic change in world power because of the disunity in Europe. Whereas before then, there was like they were doing so much. I mean, Britain was Great Britain was Great Britain, France was France, Germany was Germany. I mean, USSR was that, and all those things. So one of the major drawbacks, or sorry, one of the major disadvantages that Africa has is the disunity. And for some reason, we've not been able to get that right, even amongst the government. The government, they just seem they think they can do everything by themselves, but unfortunately, that's not going to be possible because even the countries in their own right, they are too small to build any kind of power until they come together with come together. What they call us, come together. Let me just put it that way. Okay, so let's move into what you do now on a personal basis. Yeah, because okay, like I read here, compliance, small businesses, trying to help entrepreneurs. What is something? What are the obstacles you faced, right, in trying to build what you're trying to build, from maybe from your sportswear, from your compliance business, and all. I mean, there as an entrepreneur, there are obstacles you faced. Yeah. So, what are some obstacles you faced in trying to build that to a certain kind of level?
I would say the only thing, okay, let's start with the sportswear company, Kina, right? The only thing I struggled with was the local manufacturing, the infrastructure we have for local manufacturing. I think that's why a lot of brands here that have started here, they actually just use China, right? I think even the USA, like this globalization whole thing. But I'm telling you, just to get a sample, it'll literally take you a whole month to get you a sample. And that shop that you ordered a sample from is 30 minutes away, right? Also, I just believe that we just, sorry to say this, but we don't take business seriously. I don't know if it's a lack of education as well, but business, right, Bolu? Like it's not just you having an idea, you having this product, right? Like there's marketing, there's all of these components. I just believe that, for some reason, the people who are in business, I don't know, maybe a generation will change, but the people who are in business now don't understand that, especially from a small, medium enterprise level. I think
Yeah.
if you're big, obviously you have to understand these things. So I just have, and also people don't have a vision when they start a business. People want to start small businesses and they want to stay small. But I don't believe that you wanting to stay small means your customer service needs to be bad. So from the sportswear line, I just think,
Fact.
you know, yeah. So from a customer service, I'm just disappointed in the lack of manufacturing at the back end. you know like now I have to like go to China and pay a factory because they're efficient. They have a chain supply. Their supply chain is very efficient. you know so I just think that disappointed me, to a point where I wanted to start my own factory. But I need to hire my own people. I need to find the right people, which is also
Yeah.
difficult to find the right people,
Yeah.
especially from the sportswear side of it, because it's very technical. It's not just clothing, it's very specific. I would say also with the compliance company was more of like the technology, the
Mm.
AI, the back end, the APIs, like what were we going to use, like figuring out the system of how, because Complia was basically a regulation as a compliance program where all your compliance happens in one place, right? So it's not decentralized where like you have to go to this accountant or this accountant. Everything happens in one place, right? You upload your documents in one place. Everything happens in one place. So obviously coming up with that system to say, okay, the customer journey, the back end, how does that figure out for us to actually, and now we needed government APIs. We needed government APIs permissions, which took us a long time because, government. they take their own time to answer and all of these things. So, so yeah, man. So I think that was the problem with Comply, but everything got sorted out at the end. But yeah, these were the so-called issues that I had, the biggest issues that I had.
I mean, thinking about the first one you mentioned, so you're trying to develop footwear. Now you need to develop in a factory, but then the factory, the efficient ones are in China. Now, if you have to build your own factory, of course, you'll go through government protocols. Like in the last guest I had, she mentioned that there's a lot of red tape in trying to get things approved with the government because you have to do this and this and that and that, and then some people will even ask you for some things before they give you some things. I mean, there's just so much, and that is aside from you trying to get funding or whatever. Because guess what? Before you do all these things, you probably need funding. You need funding to do a lot of these things, and then that is another point of discussion because you realize, okay, so there was something I posted on LinkedIn once. I said, okay, so managing bank managing directors talk about how there's a lot of money on the continent. Presidents talk about how there's a lot of wealth on the continent. This person is talking about wealth on the continent. Yet, if businesses are looking for funding, there's no funding. So where's all the money going? Where's all the money if all of you are talking about wealth? Right. So you and then I started to think about it. When you look at, for example, I mean, it's not a good comparison, but in Silicon Valley, they fund some of the weirdest things because there's just a lot of money. Whereas in Africa, even the very valuable ones are unable to get funding. I am wondering, why is this so? If there's so much wealth, why can't you fund some of these things? Where is the problem exactly? If from your own point of view, where do you think the problem is? Where is all the wealth, or is there wealth but there are no people ready to fund stuff? There's no innovation mentality. What exactly is the problem?
You know, to be honest, I think with Silicon Valley, like with that example, right? I understand what you're saying. It's not a really a good example, but I think it's a good example to look at because I believe that during the time of the Silicon Valley boom or the web 1.0, right? When it started in the 2000s and all of this, right? A lot of wealth, even globally, was just, it started to center, right? It started to center there. Like that became the center of technology and, global wealth and everything. Obviously, Africa is not unique to this, right? We are not unique because Europe actually also struggled, right? Because with the Silicon Valley boom, they also struggled. They also fell behind. So that's a very unique thing. But with Africa specifically, I know that now there are people who are fighting, right? Like I'm part of this Jasiri program. There are people that are trying to invest in our countries because they actually realize that there's a lot of opportunity, right? Because we are so underdeveloped, there's a lot of opportunity, right? That's why you see like sometimes like other countries like China take advantage of this, right? They build their own rails, they hire their own people, they use their own companies to build our infrastructure. And we are not, you know, able to like integrate ourselves into that, with our own startups and everything. But there are people fighting, there are people fighting. I think that's the best thing you can do because I mean, there's going to
I
be
mean, this
obviously
is
these forces of evil that are always trying to exploit Mother Africa, and all these other things. But there are people who are fighting and trying to give us funding. But also, another problem is this corruption. It's this corruption. I just think also with the government, they try in their words, but their execution, their greed, stops them from executing.
mm,
Like I said, with this whole China influx of infrastructure, then building our railroads and everything. I mean, I'm not against it, but we can why we not build our own companies? Like there are people, Boli, there are people. People is not that like I'm saying, not people. We have people with PhDs in engineering. We have engineers. It's just that they work
mhm.
for American companies. They go to Silicon Valley. I mean, people. We have the people to do whatever we need to do. There's
Yeah,
nothing really stopping Africans, really. Uh, but I just think more individuals need to come through. More individuals. And I think
more
that's been the power
individuals.
now. That's where the fight is, you know.
Mm.
and
I mean,
mobilizing those individuals mobilizing for a common goal.
yeah, yeah, exactly, for a common goal. Because I've realized, yeah, there are a lot of, I mean, even in Nigeria here, there are a lot of individuals, there are a lot of groups. What's the word now? I can't remember the word now. But there are a lot of individuals trying to do the right thing, but a lot of the time they're going in different directions, or they're trying to take different routes to doing the right thing. So why not come together and try to achieve a common goal? Because that's going to go a long way in achieving whatever it is that we want to achieve. So there's so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about. So from everything you said now, obviously the diverse cultures in Africa is not a weakness, like you mentioned. It's actually a strength, but
Mm,
it has been made to be a weakness because of external influence, right? So if I
mm.
look at South African, or you look at a Nigerian, or I look at a Ghanaian, how how can we let people understand that the difference in our cultures does not mean that we cannot work together, or does not mean we cannot come together to achieve a common goal. So, for example, I think media is a huge part of it, which is the vision I have for this. Just trying to change the narrative around how we perceive each other, and how the world perceives Africa generally. But it has to start from us. If we can change how we perceive each other, then we can change the narrative. But then, in your own opinion, how do you think we can then reconfigure that mentality, that because you are Ghanaian, you are different from me, and we cannot work together? How can we change that? What do you think?
Bolu, I'm just going to tell you how I transcended this. How, like, I transcended it by God. I believe everybody's made in the image of God, right? And because of that, I respect everybody. Everybody to me is equal. I see God in everybody, whether you're Nigerian, Ghanaian, doesn't matter, right? We're all going to be different of our cultures because obviously we are raised in different geographic locations. We're raised again, like we have our own creativity, and that's something God gave us, right? So that's what has helped me. So hence I don't see when I see a Nigerian person, I don't see a Nigerian person. I'm seeing in the image of God, and I see someone I need to respect. The problem is, um, but let me say it, right? This is my opinion. The problem is we in South Africa specifically, the reason why there's tribalism or xenophobia is the reason that people they don't see God in other people. What I mean is they see
Mm,
other Africans, especially South Africans, see other Africans as being beneath them, right? Because other
mm,
Africans are darker or they have different features or anything because they talk different. So they see them as less. Because you're not South African, it's like you're less, right? Hence, I'm saying, the problem is our culture is good. Culture is good, but our culture should not be our God. Our culture should not
mm.
be our God because our culture can be your God. A culture can be your God. You can think you're superior to other people because you're XYZ. I don't look at myself like that, right? I would say looking at it from a South African complex because I know a lot of South Africans suffer with xenophobia, right? And they hate foreigners, right? Not because the excuses like foreigners are taking our jobs and all these other things. No, it's not because of that. I mean, there are other things, of course, everybody's implicated, right? No one is perfect, right? I'm not saying all Nigerian people who are here in South Africa are perfect, but not all South Africans who are here are perfect either. But talking about that playing level, how can I see you as someone I can collaborate with? How can I not see you and I cannot look at and I look down upon you because you're from Ghana or you're from, you know? So we have this superiority complex in South Africa. A lot of South Africans have this superiority complex, especially when they look at Africans, at other Africans, right? Not against the white people or Europeans, but versus Africa, we think we are the better. We think we are the
Mm.
best. We think, we have the best country, everything, and we look down upon other people. We basically look at them as animals. Sorry to say this, but
Ooh,
this is the reality,
wow.
This is the reality, this is the reality. But what helped me transcend is it's God, man. Like God helped me so much to make me understand that everybody's the same. Everybody's
Mm.
the same. So I think that's my clue. That's my clue. Maybe other people have other clues that maybe they can think we can share. But the reason why I believe I say God is because it's too deep. I don't think anything else can help. Maybe other people have their suggestion. It's just too deep. The hate that I
Mm,
see when I see um other Africans hating on each other. I mean, brother, I grew up in 2007 when xenophobia was rife. Like
mm,
xenophobia was rife. People were being burned. People were being burned. You understand? Not because they were doing anything, just because they were from another country, a neighboring country, just because they were a foreigner. So I know the hate runs deep. It's too deep to be fixed over a song. It's too deep to be fixed over,
mm.
you know, it's too deep, brother. That's why I just believe God is the lost answer. It's the lost answer, man. Like, I know maybe someone else has a different opinion.
Those are really heavy words. I must say, it's too deep to just brush over. You have to like go in deep because the wiring has been tampered with from the essence, really. So you can't do anything about it
Hmm.
except go to God and say, God, what can you do about this? How can we fix this? It's not going to be over a song somebody sang somewhere that is singing about unity, because if you sing a song about unity, people will just dance and forget about the unity we're talking about. I mean, that's like someone said in the last episode that we spoke about. She said we don't take things seriously, we joke about everything. So if somebody
Hmm.
sings a song about
Hmm.
unity, that is very deep song, they will forget the depth and just dance to it and forget about the unity we're talking about. That is how unserious we are as Africans. Okay, so in all of this now, just trying to round up this conversation, what what gives you hope about Africa? So, I mean, we've talked about so many things. So we started about what makes you, what is the best thing about being South African and African. So now we're rounding up about what gives you hope about Africa. When you look at Africa, what gives you hope about it?
So I'm an Afrofuturist, right? Like at my core. And really the way I define my Afrofuturistic, for me, the future is always about hope. The future is always about hope. So I always believe there's hope in Africa, right? I mean, we are not the first civilization that's coming down from the bottom, right? China went through it,
Right?
Asia went through it, America went through it, Europeans even went through it as well. So we are not the first. We're not special in terms of we are down in everything. But I do believe that, you know, for me, I want my life to be a light to someone else in Africa to say you can do it as well. To start that chain reaction, like what do they call? Like when you watch that Christopher Nolan movie Oppenheimer, right? They say like
Yeah.
when that one item splits, right? It creates like a chain reaction where every item splits and then it creates a nuclear bomb, right? Something like that. Something like that, right? Someone will correct me if I'm wrong, right? But that chain
Definitely,
reaction to
definitely.
create a
Don't
nuclear
forget.
bomb,
Don't worry about
it starts with
that.
one atom. Yeah, it starts with one atom, right? It starts with that one. So I want to be that one in the chain reaction to make sure, because I'm black, I'm from Africa, I'm from these circumstances, but I know it's possible. I know I can transcend. You can always transcend. You can always transcend your circumstances, God willingly, right? That's what I believe in. I want to be the change I want to see. But the hope for Africa is it's possible. And hopefully, what I do, what you're doing, Bolu, what we are doing, starts that chain reaction to make people understand that, So for me, I know we will, Bolu, we might probably even this might be the beginning of Africa going like up. It might have been already started. I have a feeling it's already started. But
It has already started. Yeah,
yeah,
it has.
it was already started, really. So we are really on the up, we are really coming up. We are
Yeah,
really coming up. And, sometimes,
I'm listening. I'm listening.
no, I'm saying sometimes it's just that, we might not be aware of it. We just might not
Yeah,
be aware of it. But
yeah.
the good thing about being down is that you have the opportunity to get up. And I see that we are getting up, actually. So the future is very hopeful. I don't even have to hope much because I know we are already this renaissance, this period is already in motion. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
already
I,
in
I
motion.
see I see a lot of things, and it just tells me that Africa is coming. Africa is coming.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you now. I mean, it went off for a while. So there's a statistics that says, well, doesn't it's not a statistic that says, it's just the reality. Over 65% of Africans are youth, right? So that means 30 and under. Over 65% of Africans are 30 and under. Over 70% are 35 and under, which means the future actually belongs to Africans. But then it is up to us to utilize that advantage. Because what happens is other civilizations, other continents, other people will then come to take advantage of that if we don't do that. So that is why this whole setting, this whole arrangement is set up for that, to be able, if we can reconfigure ourselves, see things differently, see ourselves differently, see the world differently, then we are able to like change things gradually, gradually. If the older generation could not do it, doesn't mean we cannot do it, but we can, which is why we are trying to come together and make things work. So thank you so much, Koketso. I really appreciate you
No,
doing this
thank you,
with the
man.
very,
No,
very
thank you.
basic setup that I have. I mean, I'm going to make sure I call you back when there's a much bigger, more sophisticated setup. But right now, with the basic one, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. So
No, 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 Bolu. Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. Yeah, keep pushing. I see, like you're pushing, you're very serious, and you're very consistent. And I know, like I said, all you need is just momentum, and yeah, like everything else is gonna come through. So I'm not in doubt. And thank you for inviting me. I'm really humbled to just have this good conversation, to just share. Yeah, so thank you very much.